Welcome to our series on Rambam's Hilchot Talmud Torah, and we are going to be starting chapter 6, and we dedicate this episode in memory of Levi ben Moshe Esther and Elisheva Yael bat Levi, and also in memory of Rabbi Umori, Rabbi Roni Salach ben Avram Ezra. And I'm going to hand you over to Michael.
Thank you, Rabbi Mashiach. So in this Mishnah, and in this chapter 6, we are going to continue the concept of respect due to elders and due to teachers and otherwise. So let's begin. Halacha Aleph. Kol Talmid Chacham Mitzvah lahadro. It is a mitzvah to respect every Torah scholar. V'afal pi she'eino rabbo, even if he is not one's teacher. Just before we carry on, if I can quote or refer to the Sefer HaMitzvot, the Positive Commandment 209, Rambam counts this as one of the Torah's 613 mitzvot. And also in the Guide to the Perplexed, Volume 3, Chapter 36, the Rambam explains the motivating principle for this mitzvah. If respect is not shown to scholars, their teaching will not be upheld and Torah study will be neglected. And Rambam continues, Shnei Emar, as it is stated in Leviticus 19:32, Mipnei Seva Tokum V'Hadrata Pnei Zokein. Stand up before a white-haired man and respect an elder. Zokein ze shekana chakma. The word Zokein, translated as elder, alludes to the Hebrew words meaning one who has acquired wisdom. And when is it obliged to stand before him? When he approaches within 4 cubits of him, ad she'yavo mikeneged panav, until he passes from him. Do you know what is the measurement of a cubit?
A cubit, an amah, is about 1.5 feet between. Well, Daled Amot is between 6 and 8 feet.
Okay.
So each Amah is between 1.5 and 2 feet.
So about 6 to 8 feet are the distances of this because this is going to come up again and again. The 4 cubits. Halacha base. Ein omdim mipanav v'lo mibveis hamerchav. One should not stand up before a scholar in a bathhouse or a toilet. Shneema, as it is stated, Tokum v'hadrata. Stand up in respect. Kima sheyesh ba hidur. This implying that standing up conveys respect. Ve'en ba'alei amunios chayavim le'amod mipnei talmidei chachamim b'sh'ah she'oskin b'ma'al chatan. Craftsmen are not obligated to stand before the Torah scholars while they are involved in their work. Also because it is, Rambam quotes, Tokum v'hadrata, stand up in respect. But this is very interesting. Let me just finish this and we'll go back to it. Ma hidur, it can be inferred that she'en ba chesron kis, af kima she'en ba chosron kis. Just as showing respect does not involve a financial loss, standing need not involve a financial loss. So, what are we talking about here? Various commentaries disagree whether a craftsman may interrupt his work to show a scholar this token of respect or not. The Kesef Mishneh states that a craftsman is permitted to do so and rules accordingly in the Shulchan Aruch, Yoredeya 2445. In contrast, Rabbeinu Nissim, Chulim 54b, maintains that a craftsman is not permitted to stand because the general impression that will be created. For example, some craftsmen standing in honor of the scholar and some not will not be favorable. I think this is like in an instant where people are working together in a large room. Some people may be stuck within their work and they can't get up as easily as other craftsmen in the room, and they, not of their own fault or lack of respect, just because they're perhaps holding something or working on something that they cannot interrupt. The commentary continues. This difference of opinion exists only in regards to craftsmen working independently. So all authorities agree that a craftsman hired by others may not stand. His time is not his own, and by standing he steals time from his employer. Minyan shelo ya'atzim einov min hachacham. What is the source that teaches that a person should not divert his eyes from the scholar? Kedei shelo yerahei ad shelo ya'amod biponov, that he will not see him lest he be required to stand before him. Shneimah, as it is stated, v'yerata me'alecha, you shall fear your God. Ha kol davar shehu motzuv lalev. With regard to all matters dependent on one's conscience, the Torah states, "V'yoreta me'elohecha," you shall fear your God. Now, this is referring to a craftsman or somebody, not a craftsman, just a normal person who sees a scholar coming from afar, but yet he turns his back on him as if he didn't see him, so he doesn't have to offer him respect. In other words, he sees him from afar and then he pretends not to see him so that he doesn't have to stand up. This is a source of disrespect that you should not kind of see someone and then divert your eyes as if you didn't see them to avoid showing respect. Halacha 3. Ein ra'u l'chacham. It is not proper for a scholar שיטריח את העם ויקוון עצמו להם כדי שיעמדו מפניו, to trouble the people and position himself before them so that they will have to stand for him. אלא ילך בדרך קצרה, rather he should take shortcuts ומסכוון שלא יראו אותו, and have the intention that they should not see him, כדי שלא יטרחן לעמוד, so that he will not trouble them to stand. This is a very high level. You know, we're talking here, this is Rambam stating that really pious people should take longer routes around places that are less travelled, so that people, you know, are not troubled to offer the respect that is deserving of them. So it's very interesting. The Chachomim would take circular routes through the outskirts of their cities. The people did not recognize them and would not be found. So in order not to trouble them. So a very high grade of piousness to circumvent people in order that he should not trouble them, because you know that they have to show you respect. Halacha 4. Rochev harehu kim halech. Riding is considered to be walking. Just as one stands before a scholar who is walking, so one should stand before one who is riding. Kiddushin 33a relates that Abaya would stand as soon as he saw the donkey of Rav Yosef, his teacher, approach. Halacha 5. Shlosha shehoyu holchim baderech. Harav be'emtza gadol mimeno v'katan mishmor lo. When three people are journeying together, the master should walk in the center, the student of greater stature on his right, and the one of lesser stature on his left. Halacha Vav. Haro'eh chacham eino omed b'panav ad sheyegia lo le'arba amos. One who sees a scholar need not stand in deference to him or honor to him until he reaches within 4 cubits of him. Again, this 8 foot distance. V'kaven she'ya'avor yoshev. Once he has passed, he may sit. Ra'a av beis din omed milfanav. If one should see the av beis din, one should stand in deference to him or honor of him. Mishira'eno merochek melo enov. From the time he sees him, and as far as the eye can see. Ve'eno yoshev. He may not sit ad she'ya'avor me'acharav arba amos, until he has passed from him 4 cubits, about 8 foot beyond him. Ra'a et hanasi. If one should see the nasi, this is the Chief Justice's deputy, so to speak, the Nasi, Omed Milfanav Melo Einov, one should stand in deference to him from the time he sees him. Ve'eno yoshev ad sheyeshev bimkomo o ad sheniskaseh me'enav. Or he may not sit until he has reached his place or passed beyond the field of vision and is hidden. Vahanasi shemachal al kavodo. If the nasi desires to waive the honor due to him, kavodo mochol, he may forego it. Keshe hanasi nichnas, when a nasi enters a house of study, kol ha'am omdim, all the people should stand. Ve'einam yoshvim ad sheyomar lahem shevu, they may not sit until he tells them to sit. כשאב בית דין נכנס, עושים לו שתי שורות ועומדים מכאן ומכאן. When the Av Beis Din, the kind of chief justice of the Beis Din, enters, 2 rows are opened for him. עד שנכנס ויושב במקומו. And the people stand on either side, ושאר העם יושבים, until he enters and sits in his place, ושאר העם יושבים bimkoman. The other people remain seated in their places. So what are we talking about here? 2 rows are opened up for him. What we must understand is that today when we give shiurim or we are in shuls, we use kind of auditoriums as with fixed seats. The settings for this law are difficult to imagine, but in Talmudic times the people would sit on the floor. When the Av Beis Din arrived, the people sitting between the entrance and his place would stand and create a path of him 2 rows wide. Halacha 7. Chacham shenichnas kol sheyegia lo ba'arbat amot. When a scholar enters, when he approaches within 4 cubits of anyone, omed milfanav, the latter should stand for him. Echad omed ve'echad yoshev ad shenichnas ve'yoshev bimkomo. Thus one stands and another one sits until he enters and sits in his place. So you can imagine when a scholar, Talmud Chacham, enters a place and is walking within 4 cubits of a crowd of people, it's like a wave of people standing up and who is past sitting down. I think this is what is meant. Ad shenichnas b'yoshev b'mkomo, until he sits in his place. Ben chachamim v'talmidei chachamim b'zman she'harba'im tzrichim lahem makpitzin al ro'ashei ha'am v'nichnasim limkomon. The sons and students of the scholars may jump over the heads of the people to reach their place when their presence is required by the people at large. So again, we must remind ourselves of when this was written and what circumstances. Again, not fixed seats. You can't imagine the children of Chachamim and their students jumping over people's heads in modern settings. This is when people sat on the floor. So you can understand why Rambam is saying they're allowed to jump over their heads. Why is this? Why is it important that they are allowed to jump over the heads? It is when these children and students their presence is an asset to their teacher, because through their questions they are able to enable their teacher to penetrate to the core of the subject matter. Therefore, they are allowed to proceed to their places at the front of the house of study, even if doing so is somewhat discourteous to the people who have already taken their places. It is not praiseworthy for a scholar to enter the house of study last. Yatsa litzorech. If one leaves to do his needs, so to speak, or maybe go to the toilet, chozer limkomo, he may return to his place. Bnei chachamim, the children of the scholars, bizman sheyesh bahem da'at lishma, chofchin pneihem kalpei avihem. If they have enough knowledge to listen, turn their faces towards their father. En bahem da'at lishma. If they lack the knowledge to listen, chofchin pneihem kalape ha'am. They must turn their faces towards the people. Halacha 8. Talmid shehu yoshev lifnei rabo tamid. A student who is constantly sitting before his teacher. This means that perhaps a student is learning the whole day with his teacher. Eno rasha le'amod b'fanav, is permitted to rise in his honor only twice daily. Elo shacharis va'arvit bilvad, in the morning and the evening. Shelo yehei kvodo merubeh b'chvod shamayim, so that the honor paid to the teacher does not exceed the honor paid to God. And I think this is the Kesef Mishnah explains that twice daily. This means twice daily is when we accept the yoke of God's service by reciting the Shema. So it doesn't have to do it more than that. Halacha 9. Mishu zaken muflag bezikneh. We should stand before an elderly man of exceedingly advanced age, even if he is not a scholar. Even a scholar who is young is obligated to stand before an elderly man of exceedingly advanced age. Nevertheless, he need not rise to his full height, but need to show some token of respect. Even an elderly Gentile, mahadrin oto bidvarim, should be addressed with words of respect. V'notnim lo yad l'samcho, and a hand should be extended to support him. Shneimar, as it's written, Pnei sheva tokum kol sheva b'mashma, as it says in Leviticus 19:32, stand up before a white-haired man. This means every white-haired man is included in that. So we know in Kedushin 33 Amud Aleph relates that Rabbi Yochanan would stand in deference to an elderly or aged Gentile, explaining how many experiences has he gone through. Also found in Kedushin 33 Amud Aleph notes that Rabbah would also follow this practice of giving respect to elderly Gentiles, and also Abaya would also follow this practice. Halacha 10. Talmidei Chachamim eino yotzim ba'atzman la'asot im kol hakahal. Torah scholars should not personally take part in any communal work projects. B'vinyan v'chafira shel medina kiyotze bahen. For example, building, digging, and the like, to improve the city. Kedei shelo yisbazu b'fnei amei haaretz, lest they become disgraced in the eyes of common people. But we know that although they're not obliged to take part in the work, they are obliged to bear the costs of projects. This Rambam mentions in later chapters in Hilchot Shechenim, the laws of neighbours, chapter 6, verse 6. And further, in the Shulchan Aruch states that they are only obligated to pay the costs of the raw materials, and this applies only when the work is performed by members of the community. If workers are hired by the community to complete the task, the scholars must also pay their fair share. Rambam continues, V'ein govim mehem levinyan chachoma v'tikun hasharim u'ksha hashamrim v'kiyotze bahen. Money should not be collected from them to pay for the building of the city, fixing its gates, or watchmen's wages, and such like. V'lo litshurat hamelech, and the same applies to when people want to offer presents to a king. Ve'en machyavim otam leten hamas. Similarly, they're not obliged to pay taxes. Ben mas shehu kotsuv al benei ha'ir, neither their share in a tax levied on the city as a whole. Ben mas shehu kotsuv al kol ish ve'ish, nor a head tax levied on each individual. This is alluded to by the quote from Hosea 8:10. Gam ki yitnu bagoyim ata akbatzem veyichelu me'at mematza melech v'shorim. Although they give amongst the nations, now I will gather them. In a little while they will be released from the burden of the king and his officers. Just one thing that Bava Basra also in I think 8 Amud Aleph mentions that a Persian king called Artashta, who sent Ezra to rebuild Yerushalayim, freed all those involved in this holy work from all forms of taxes and tribute. Similarly, if a Torah scholar has merchandise to sell, manichim oto limkar tchila, he is allowed to sell it first. It is in the market. Ve'en manichim echad mipnei hashuk limkar ad she'imkar hu, and no other person at the marketplace is allowed to sell until he does. V'chein im haya lo din. Well, let's just stop there for a second. So the Talmud Chacham, if he's in the market and he has something to sell, no one can sell until he's offered his stuff and sold his stuff. So, but we know that Rambam has very harshly forbidden a Torah scholar to take money from charity because of his knowledge. The Shulchan Aruch states that this law applies when the market is controlled by Jewish people. However, if there are Gentiles who will sell their goods alongside him irregardless, the other Jewish merchants are not obliged to risk suffering a loss. So this halacha is specific for when the market is controlled by Jews, and they're not going to lose out because the Gentiles are saying, oh, we've only got one competitor at the Talmud Chacham, everybody else has to wait until he sells his stuff. And Rambam continues, V'chein im haya lo din. Similarly, if a Torah scholar, similarly, if he has a legal matter, V'haya omed bichlal be'alei dinim harbe, and stands among many other litigants, makdimim oto, he is given priority, or moshivim oto, and he is allowed to sit. Halacha 11. Avon gadol hu lavazot et hachachamim or lehisanosam. It is a great sin to disgrace Torah scholars or to hate them. Lo charbe Yerushalayim. Jerusalem was not destroyed ad shebizu ba talmidei chachamim, until its inhabitants disgraced its talmidei chachamim. Shneema, as it is stated, vayihiyu malivim b'malachei elakim uvozim devarav umit at im benivov. And it is quoted from Chronicles 36:16, and they would mock the messengers of God, despise his words, and scoff at his prophets. Kalomar, as for example, Bozim Melamdei Devarov, they would scorn those who taught his words. V'chein, and similarly, Zeh she'amra Torah, in the Torah statement in Leviticus 26:16, Im b'chokosai tim osu. If you despise my statutes, should be interpreted Melamdei chokosai tim asu. If you despise the teachers of my statutes, V'chol hamvazeh et hachachamim. Whoever disgraces the scholars, ein lo chelek b'olam haba, has no portion in the world to come. It's also included in this category from Numbers 15:31. V'harehu bichlal ki devar Hashem bazeh. Those who scorn the word of God. Halacha 12. Afapi שמבזה את החכמים אין לו חלק לעולם הבא. Even though a person who disgraces a Torah scholar will not receive a portion in the world to come, in ba'u edim, if witnesses come, sheba'azuhu, that testify that he disgraced him, afilu bidvarim, if only verbally, chayov nidoi, he is placed under a ban of ostracism, or manadim oto bet din barabim, the ban is publicly announced in a court, or konsin oto litra Zahav Mikol Makom, and he is fined an amount of a litra of gold, and he is forced to pay this to the scholar. V'notnin oto lachacham, and he must give this to the scholar. So what is this litra? What is a litra? A litra actually, it's an approximate value of 168 grams of gold, which is quite a hefty amount of gold to pay as a penalty for disgracing a scholar. Uvazeh etacham bidvarim afilu la'achar mita. Even one who disgraces a scholar after his death, manadin oto bet din, is placed under the ban of ostracism. They should release the ban after he repents. But if on contrast, if the scholar is alive, they do not release the ban until he appeases the scholar for whose honor he was ostracized for. וכן החכם עצמו מנדה לכבודו לעם הארץ שהפקיר בו. To protect his honor, a scholar may issue a ban of ostracism against the common person who acted outrageously against him. ואין צורך, לא לעדים ולא התראה. And he doesn't need witnesses, nor must the offender have been warned. ואין עתירים לא עד שיוצא את החכם. If the ban is not lifted until he appeases the Torah scholar. If the scholar dies, 3 people may come to lift the ban. If the scholar desires to forgive him and not place him under a ban, he is permitted to do so. Halacha 13. Harav shenida lichvodo. Kol talmidov chayovim linhog nidoi b'menuda. There. If a teacher placed a person under a ban of ostracism because of his honor, all the students are obligated to treat the person in the required fashion. Aval talmid shenida lichvod atzmo. However, if a student issued a ban on ostracism because of his own honor, ein harav chayov linhog bo nidoi. His teacher is not obligated to abide by the terms of his student's ban on this other person. Aval kol ha'am chayovim linhog bo nidoi. Nevertheless, all other people are obligated to do so. V'chein menudeh lenasi. Similarly, when a person is placed under the ban of ostracism because of an affront to the honor of the nasi, Menuda lechal Yisrael. All Jews are obligated to abide by the terms of this ban. Menuda lechal Yisrael eno menuda lenasi. However, if a person is placed under the ban of ostracism because of any Jew, menuda leiro, menuda leir acheret. Eno menuda lenasi. The nasi is not obligated to abide by it. Munudel iro, when a person is placed under a ban of ostracism because of his city, like a city-wide ban. Munudel le'ir acheret, other cities must abide by this ban. Munudel le'ir acheret, however, if he is placed under a ban by other cities, eno munudel le'iro, his own city need not abide by the ban. Halacha 14. When does this apply? B'mi sheniduhu al shebiza talmidei chachamim. When the ban was imposed because the person acted disrespectfully to a Torah scholar. Aval mi shenidhu al sha'a dvarim shechayavim aleihem nidui. However, a person who was placed under a ban of ostracism for another reason, for which such a ban may be declared, afilu nidhu katan shebi Israel, even if the ban was declared by a person of the lowest kind of rank or stature of Israel, chayav hanasi v'chol Yisrael linhog bo nidui. The Nasi and all other Jews are obligated to abide by the terms of the ban. Ad sheyachzor b'tshuva b'dvar sheneduhu bishvilo va'atiru lo, until he repents for the matter which the ban was imposed, and the ban is lifted. Ad osrim ve'arba dvarim menadin et ha'adam ben ish ben isha or ve'elu hen. The ban of ostracism is imposed upon a person, either a man or a woman, for the following 24 reasons. Number 1, Vazeh et hachacham, afilu la'achar moto. A person disgraces a scholar even after his passing. Number 2, Bamazeh shaliach beit din, a person who embarrasses a messenger of the courts. Number 3, Akore l'chavero eved, a person who calls his colleague a slave. Number 4, Mishe shalchu lo beit din v'kav'u lo zman v'lo ba, a person who was ordered to appear before a court at a specific time and did not come, or for example, contempt of court. Number 5, Hamzalzel b'dvar echad midvrei sofrim ve'en sarich lomar b'dvrei Torah, a person who treats even one point of rabbinic law with disrespect. Needless to say, this applies regarding all matters of scriptural law. 6, Mi shelo kibel alav et hadin menadin oto ad sheyeten, a person who refuses to comply with the decisions rendered by a court is placed under a ban until he complies. Number 7, Mishiyesh brushuto davar hamazik kugon kelev ra im sulam ru'ua menadin oto ad sheyazir hezeko, a person who possesses an entity that could cause damage. For example, a dangerous dog or a faulty ladder is placed under a ban until he removes that entity. Number 8, Hamocher karka shelo le'oved kochavim menadin oto ad sheyikabel alav kol ones sheyavin min ha'oved kochavim l'Yisrael chavero ba'al hametzer. A person who sells land to a Gentile is placed under a ban until he accepts responsibility for any damages which the Gentile may cause his Jewish neighbor. And number 9, Hameid et al Yisrael ba'arakayos shel ovdei kochovim v'hotzi memeno ba'eduso mamon shelo kedin Yisrael menadin oto ad sheyishalem. A person who testifies against a Jewish colleague in a secular court and causes money from which Torah law would not require him to pay to be expropriated from him is placed under a ban until he repays that amount of money. Number 10, Tavach Kohen she'eno mafrish hamatanot v'notnom lekohen acher mednadin oto ad sheyiten. A butcher who is a priest and does not separate the priestly gifts and gives them to another priest is placed under the ban until he gives them. And number 11, Hamachalel Yom Tov V'shnei Shel Gluyos Afal Pi Shehu Minhag, a person who violates the sanctity of the second day of the festivals in the diaspora, even though their observance is only a custom. Number 12, Ha'osem Lacha Ba'erev Pesach Achar Chatzot, a person who performs work on Pesach evening after noon. So Pesach evening is singled out because of the Paschal sacrifice that was offered at that time. Number 13, Hamaskir Shem Shamayim Levatala or Lishvua B'divrei Chavai, a person who takes God's name in vain or takes an oath casually. 14. Hamevi et harabim lidei chilul Hashem, a person who causes many to desecrate God's name. 15. Hamevi et harabim lidei achila kedashim b'chutz, person who causes many to eat sacrificial food outside of its proper place. 16. Hamchashev shnayim v'koveh chadoshim b'chutza et harabim lidei achila kedushim b'chutz. V'koveh chadoshim b'chutza l'aaretz. A person who calculates the years and declares a leap year or fixes the day of the new month in the diaspora. Number 17. Hamachshil et ha'avir, a person who causes the blind or morally unaware to stumble. Hama'akev harabim miloshot mitzvah, a person who prevents the many from performing a mitzvah. Number 19. Tevach sheyatza trefa metachat yodo, a butcher who sells non-kosher meat or sold non-kosher meat. Tavak shelo badak sakino lifnei chacham, a butcher who does not inspect his knife in the presence of a scholar. Hamakshe atzmo lada'at, someone who arouses himself sexually or is in an aroused state, that does it on purpose. 22. Mi shegaresh et ishto va'asa beino uveino shetofus or matzah or matan hamavi'in lahen lehizakek ze lazeh, a person who divorced his wife and then entered into a partnership or business dealings with her which required them to come into contact. K'sheyava'u leves din mandinotam, when they came to court they are placed under a ban. So after a divorce, a couple should have as little contact with each other as possible, lest the familiarity they previously enjoyed led them to intimacy outside the bounds of marriage. And number 23, Chacham sheshamu'ato ra'a, a scholar whose reputation is unsavory. And number 24, Hamanadeh min she'eno chayav nidoi, a person who places a person under a ban when the latter does not deserve such punishment. And that concludes the 6th Mishnah of
wow, that's amazing, Michael. Thank you so much for that. Very, very interesting, enlightening episode, especially as it builds up towards the end of the chapter. So thank you so much, Michael. And with that, we wish you a wonderful and blessed week.